The silence in the throne room was so complete that Daniel could hear his own heartbeat. Thousands of Volantes stared at him. Their crystalline eyes reflected the light of the chamber, making them look like a sea of stars. None of them blinked. Marveth was the first to speak. His voice was cold and sharp, like breaking ice. This is a joke. A human cannot participate in the speaking. This is a sacred Volante tradition. The high priest stepped forward. His movements were slow and careful, and when he spoke, his voice cracked with age. The right of witness is written in the oldest laws. It states that any being present at the speaking may offer testimony if they possess direct knowledge relevant to the accusations. Any Volante being, Marveth corrected. The law does not say Volante. The priest looked at Daniel with ancient eyes that had seen centuries of history. It says any being. The human has the right to speak. A wave of whispers moved through the crowd. Daniel could not tell if they were angry or curious or both. He kept his eyes forward and tried to breathe normally. Marveth took a step toward Daniel. Even from across the chamber, Daniel could feel the hatred coming off him like heat from a fire. Very well, let the human speak. But let him know the consequences. If his testimony is found to be false, if he lies before this sacred assembly, the penalty is death. Not exile. Not imprisonment. Death. I understand, Daniel said. His voice sounded stronger than he felt. Do you? Marveth walked closer. He was taller than Daniel by at least a foot, and his dark purple skin seemed to absorb the light around him. Let me be clear, human. You are not on your primitive little planet. You are not in one of your human courts where criminals walk free because of clever words. This is Volante justice. If you lie, you will die. Slowly, painfully, your body will be displayed as a warning to all who would make mockery of our ways. Daniel felt fear then. Real fear. The kind that makes your legs weak and your mouth dry. He thought about running. He thought about apologizing and returning to his place in the crowd. Katie was still there, gesturing desperately for him to come back. But then he looked at Celira. The young queen was watching him with an expression he recognized. It was hope mixed with confusion. She did not understand why this stranger was risking his life for her. She probably thought he was insane. But she was also, for the first time since the speaking began, not completely alone. Daniel thought about Clara again. He thought about standing at her grave in the November rain, promising her that he would do better, that he would be braver. I understand the consequences, he said to Marveth. I am ready to give my testimony. Marveth studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was the smile of a predator who sees trapped prey. Then speak, human. Amuse us with your primitive thoughts. And when you are finished, you will learn what happens to those who interfere in matters that do not concern them. Daniel walked forward until he stood at the center of the chamber, between Marveth and the throne where Celira sat. The weight of thousands of eyes pressed down on him. The lights from the crystals felt hot on his skin. He had been a public defender for 8 years before joining the diplomatic corps. He had stood before judges and juries countless times. He had defended the guilty and the innocent, the rich and the poor, the powerful and the forgotten. He had learned that a courtroom was a battlefield, and words were weapons. This was not a courtroom, but the principles were the same. High Lord Marveth, he began, you have accused the late Queen of treason. You claim she secretly negotiated with the Korath Dominion. You have presented documents as evidence, but your evidence is false. The crowd reacted with gasps and angry shouts. Marveth raised a hand for silence. Bold words, human. Can you prove them? I can. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a small data device. It was standard diplomatic equipment, containing copies of all of Earth's official records with the Volante Empire. This device contains Earth's complete historical records of our relationship with your people. Every meeting, every communication, every treaty negotiation. These records are verified by both human and Volanti officials. They cannot be falsified. And what do your records show? Marvith asked. His voice was still confident, but Daniel saw something flicker in his eyes. Doubt, maybe even fear. Your documents claim that Queen Mother Valith met with Korath representatives on stardate 7823. 4. At the neutral station called Farpoint. But according to our records, Queen Mother Valith was not at Farpoint on that date. She was on Earth, attending my government summit of allied worlds. I have images, communications logs, and signed documents that prove she was there for 3 full days. The crowd murmured. Daniel pressed forward. Your documents also claim that secret negotiations continued for 6 months. But during that exact period, Earth ships were patrolling the neutral zone as part of a joint security operation. Our sensors recorded every ship that passed through that region. No Korath vessels, no secret meetings, nothing that supports your story. Marvith's face had gone dark. The polite mask was cracking, showing the rage underneath. Human records can be falsified as easily as any others. Perhaps. But there is more. Daniel turned to face the crowd directly. I have been studying Volanthi history since I arrived on your world. I know that the Korath Dominion attacked your colonies 23 years ago. I know that Queen Mother Valith led the defense. What I also know, from human records that were made during that time, is that High Lord Marvith was not fighting in that war. He was stationed on the far side of the Empire, commanding a supply depot. He never faced the Korath in battle, never lost soldiers to their weapons, never saw the suffering that war brings. The crowd went very quiet. Daniel saw Marvith's hands ball into fists. Queen Mother Valith ended that war through negotiation because she had seen enough death. She had watched her people die. She knew the true cost of glory. Daniel paused. High Lord Marvith speaks of conquest and power because he has never paid the price for either. Celira rose from her throne. Her eyes were bright, and her voice was strong for the first time since the speaking began. Is this true, Uncle? Were you commanding a supply depot while my mother bled for our people? Marvith said nothing. His silence was answer enough. The throne room of the Volanthi Empire was the most beautiful place Daniel Carter had ever seen. Giant crystals grew from the walls and ceiling, each one glowing with soft light that changed colors like a slow heartbeat. The floor was made of polished stone that reflected everything like a mirror. Thousands of Volanthi stood in the chamber, their crystalline skin shining under the lights. They were tall and thin, with large eyes that seemed to look right through you. Daniel stood in the section reserved for alien diplomats. He was one of only 12 humans on this planet, and right now he felt very small. His boss, Ambassador Katie Reeves, stood next to him with her hands folded in front of her. She had told him to watch and learn. This was his first time seeing a Volanthi coronation. At the center of the room, on a throne made of pure crystal, sat Princess Queen Celira. She was young for a ruler, maybe the equivalent of 30 human years. Her skin was pale blue, and her eyes were the color of deep water. A crown of woven light floated above her head. She had become ruler only 3 months ago, after her mother died from a sudden illness. The ceremony had been going well. Priests spoke ancient words. Music played from instruments Daniel could not name. The crowd watched in respectful silence. Everything was peaceful and beautiful. Then a voice cut through the music like a knife. I invoked the speaking. The music stopped. Every head in the room turned toward the speaker. Daniel saw a tall Volanthi male step forward from the crowd. He was older, with skin that had darkened to deep purple with age. His eyes were cold and hard. He wore the uniform of a military commander, decorated with medals and symbols of rank. Katie leaned close to Daniel. "That is High Lord Marvith. He is the Queen's uncle. This is very bad." Daniel did not need to be told. He could see it in the way Salira's face went pale. He could feel it in the sudden tension that filled the room like electricity. "I invoke the speaking," Marvith said again, louder this time. "I challenge the fitness of this queen to rule our great empire." A wave of whispers moved through the crowd. Daniel saw fear on many faces, but he also saw something else on some faces: agreement, satisfaction. Marvith had supporters here. Salira stood from her throne. Her voice was steady, but Daniel could see her hands shaking slightly. "You have the right to invoke the speaking, uncle. State your challenge." Marvith smiled. It was not a kind smile. "My challenge is simple. You are not fit to lead us. Your mother raised you to be weak. You speak of peace when we should speak of power. You negotiate with our enemies when we should crush them. You shame the memory of our ancestors with your softness." The crowd reacted with mixed sounds. Some agreed with Marvith. Others seemed shocked by his words. But no one spoke against him. The speaking was sacred. Once invoked, it had to play out according to ancient law. Daniel leaned toward Katie. "What exactly is the speaking?" "It is their oldest tradition," Katie whispered back. "A public debate. The challenger and the ruler must argue their positions before the people. At the end, the crowd votes. If the challenger wins, they take the throne. If the ruler wins, the challenger is exiled." "That seems fair," Daniel said. "It would be, if it were truly fair. But Marvith has been preparing for this moment for years. Look at the crowd. At least a third of them are wearing his colors. He has planned this carefully." Daniel looked and saw that Katie was right. Many in the crowd wore small purple crystals pinned to their clothes, the same purple as Marvith's aged skin. They were his people, placed here to vote for him. On her throne, Salira seemed to realize the same thing. Her eyes moved across the crowd, counting her enemies. But she did not back down. She could not. The speaking had been invoked. She had to face it. "Speak your accusations clearly, uncle," she said. "Let the people hear what you truly think of your dead sister's daughter." Marvith walked slowly toward the throne, his boots clicking on the stone floor. "I think you are a child playing at being a queen. I think you do not understand the dangers that face our empire. I think your mother filled your head with dreams of peace while our enemies sharpened their weapons." "Peace is not weakness," Salira replied. "My mother ended 3 wars through negotiation. She saved millions of lives. She surrendered our honor," Marvith shot back. "She made deals with species who had killed our people. She invited humans to our world." He gestured toward the section where Daniel stood. "Primitive creatures from a primitive planet. And you continue her shame by keeping them here." Daniel felt the eyes of nearby Volanthi turn toward him. He kept his face calm, but inside his heart was beating fast. He had not expected to become part of this conflict. Salira's voice grew stronger. "The humans are our allies. They have given us new technology, new medicine, new ideas. My mother was wise to welcome them. Your mother was a traitor." The word hit the room like a bomb. Even Marvith's supporters seemed shocked. Salira's face went completely white. "You dare," she whispered. "I dare because I have proof." Marvith reached into his uniform and pulled out a small crystal. He held it up, and light projected from it, showing documents and images. "Your mother secretly met with the Karth Dominion, our oldest enemies, the ones who destroyed 3 of our colony worlds. She negotiated with them behind closed doors. She planned to surrender our outer territories to them in exchange for peace." "That is a lie," Salira said, but her voice was shaking now. "The records do not lie. Your mother was a traitor, and you are her heir." The same weak blood runs in your veins. The same willingness to betray our people for the illusion of peace. The crowd erupted in angry voices. Daniel watched as Celera stood alone against the storm, and he saw something that made his chest tight with anger. She was just a young woman trying to do the right thing, and she was being destroyed by lies. He had seen this before. He had seen it happen to someone he loved. And that time, he had stayed silent. Katie gripped his arm as if she could read his thoughts. "Do not even think about it," she said quietly. "This is not our fight." Daniel said nothing, but he did not take his eyes off the young queen who stood alone against the tide. The speaking continued for hours. Daniel stood in the crowd and watched as Marva slowly, carefully destroyed Celera piece by piece. The old commander was good. He had to admit that. Marva spoke with the voice of a man who had led soldiers into battle. He used words like weapons, striking at weak points, and retreating before Celera could respond. He painted pictures of a glorious past when the Volanthi were conquerors, and he blamed the current royal family for their decline. Celera fought back, but she was outmatched. She was intelligent. Daniel could see that. She understood politics and history. But she was young, and Marva had decades more experience. Every time she made a good point, he twisted it. Every time she showed strength, he found a way to make it look like weakness. "You speak of our alliance with Earth," Marva said, his voice booming through the chamber. "But what has this alliance given us? Human ships cannot match our technology. Human soldiers cannot survive in our atmosphere. Human diplomats sit in our halls and watch our sacred ceremonies like tourists at a zoo." Daniel felt his face grow hot, but he kept his expression blank. Katie stood rigid beside him, her jaw tight with anger. "The humans offer us new perspectives," Celera replied. "They have solved problems that we could not solve alone. Their medicine has cured diseases that killed our children. Their engineers have improved our food production by 30%. And in return, they learn our secrets. They study our technology. They prepare for the day when they will no longer need us." Marva smiled his cold smile. "Humans are predators, young queen. They smile while they sharpen their knives. Your mother invited them into our home, and you keep the door open. One day, you will regret it." The crowd murmured in agreement. Daniel could feel the mood shifting. Marva was winning. Katie leaned close to his ear. "I just received orders from Earth. We are to maintain complete neutrality. No matter what happens here, we do not get involved." "Even if he is lying?" Daniel whispered back. "Those documents he showed are fake." "I am sure of it. How can you be sure?" "Because I have read our own records of first contact with the Volanthi. The dates do not match. The locations do not match. Either our records are wrong or his are fabricated." Katie was quiet for a moment. "Even if you are right, we cannot interfere. This is an internal Volanthi matter. If we speak against Marva and he still wins, Earth will have an enemy on the throne. We cannot take that risk." Daniel understood the logic. He hated it, but he understood it. Politics was about calculation, not justice. He had learned that lesson the hard way. He thought about his sister, Clara. She had been a teacher, kind and gentle, and always believing the best in people. When one of her students accused her of something terrible, something she had never done, the whole town turned against her. Daniel had been a young lawyer then, just starting his career. He had told himself to wait, to be careful, to let the system work. The system had failed. The accusations were proven false, but by then it was too late. Clara could not live with the shame. She took her own life on a cold November morning, and Daniel had never forgiven himself for staying silent. He had promised himself he would never stay silent again. He had left his law practice and joined the diplomatic corps. hoping to find a place where he could make a difference without carrying the weight of other people's lives. But here he was again, watching someone be destroyed by lies, and he was being told to do nothing. On the throne platform, Marvith was reaching his conclusion. The evidence is clear. The former queen was a traitor who sold our honor for false peace. Her daughter continues her shameful legacy. I asked the people of the Volanthi Empire, do you want a traitor's heir on your throne? Or do you want a leader who will restore our glory? The crowd roared. It was not a unified sound. Some shouted for Sailira, but more shouted for Marvith. His supporters had done their work well. They were spread throughout the chamber, leading the chants, drowning out the queen's defenders. Sailira stood very still. Her face was calm, but Daniel could see the truth in her eyes. She knew she was losing. She knew that when the vote came, she would fall. Does the queen wish to speak before the vote? Asked the high priest, an ancient Volanthi with skin like aged parchment. Sailira opened her mouth, but no words came out. What could she say? She had no proof that Marvith was lying. She had only her word against his, and his word was wrapped in fabricated evidence and delivered by a voice that had commanded armies. Daniel felt something break inside him. It was the same feeling he had felt when he heard about Clara. The feeling of watching injustice happen and being powerless to stop it. No, not powerless, afraid. There was a difference. He thought about the briefing Katie had given him months ago, when he first arrived on this planet. She had made him study Volanthi law and custom for weeks. He remembered one passage about the speaking, a small detail that most people forgot. The right of witness, he muttered. Katie heard him. Her eyes went wide. Daniel, no. Any being present at the speaking may offer testimony if they possess direct knowledge relevant to the accusations. That is for Volanthi citizens. You are human. They will never allow it. The law does not specify species. I checked. Daniel. Katie grabbed his arm hard. If you do this and your testimony is found to be false, the penalty is death. Do you understand? They will execute you. Daniel looked at the young queen standing alone against the crowd. He thought about Clara. He thought about all the times in his life when he had chosen safety over justice. I understand, he said. Then he stepped forward out of the crowd and raised his voice. I invoke the right of witness. The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned toward the human who had dared to speak. Marva's face twisted with shock and rage. Sailira stared at Daniel with wide eyes, not understanding why a stranger would do this. Katie covered her face with her hands and whispered something that sounded like a prayer. Daniel stood straight and met Marva's gaze without flinching. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. But his voice was steady when he spoke again. I have evidence that these accusations are false. I demand to be heard. The mood in the throne room had changed. Daniel could feel it like a shift in the wind. The crowd that had been chanting for Marvith was now whispering questions. The supporters in purple crystals looked at each other with uncertain eyes. Marvith saw it too. The old commander had spent years planning this moment, and now a human was tearing it apart with nothing but words and truth. His face twisted with rage that he could no longer hide. You speak of records and dates, Marvith said, his voice rising. But records can be created. Dates can be changed. You are a human. Your species has been traveling among the stars for barely 2 centuries. We were building empires when your ancestors were living in caves. Why should anyone believe your primitive documentation over the evidence I have gathered? Daniel did not back down. Because my documentation is verified by your own people. Every record I carry was confirmed by Volanthi officials during our alliance negotiations. Your own government accepted these records as true. If they are false, then your own officials are liars. Is that your claim? Marvith had no answer for that. Daniel pressed forward. You call humans primitive, Daniel said, addressing the crowd now rather than Marvith. You say we are young and foolish, that we do not understand the universe. Maybe you are right. We have only been among the stars for a short time, but we have learned much in that time. We have learned that the strongest empires are not the ones that conquer the most worlds. They are the ones that build the most bridges. He thought about Katie's briefings, about the history of the Volanti that he had studied during long nights on the diplomatic station. He thought about the parallels to human history, the lessons that his own species had learned through blood and fire. Humans have fought many wars, he continued. We have destroyed ourselves almost completely more than once. We have burned our own cities and poisoned our own land. We know what conquest really means. We know the price of glory. The crowd was listening now. Really listening. Daniel could see the change in their faces, the curiosity replacing the hostility. Your queen's mother understood this. She saw the destruction that the Korath War brought to her people, and she chose to end it through negotiation rather than letting it continue until one side was completely destroyed. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. That is the kind of strength that builds lasting peace rather than temporary victory. Celira stepped down from her throne and walked toward Daniel. She moved with a grace that seemed almost like floating, her crystalline skin catching the light. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. This human speaks truth, she said. I have felt his mind since he began speaking. He has no deception in him, only conviction and courage. Daniel blinked. He had forgotten that the Volanti were telepathic. Celira had been reading his emotions the entire time. I have also felt my uncle's mind, Celira continued. He is filled with ambition and anger. He does not care about our empire's glory. He cares only about his own power. He has been planning this moment since before my mother died. Perhaps... She paused, and her voice went cold. Perhaps he planned my mother's death as well. The crowd erupted. Shouts of shock and anger filled the chamber. Marva's face went from purple to almost black with rage. You dare accuse me of murder? He roared. You, a child who has never commanded a single soldier? You, who learned everything you know from a traitor mother. My mother was no traitor. Celira's voice cut through the noise like a blade. And this human has proven it. Your evidence is false. Your accusations are lies. You have shamed yourself before our people and our ancestors. I have done nothing but try to save our empire from weakness, Marvith shouted. He turned to his supporters in the crowd. You see how she defends the human. You see how she chooses an outsider over her own blood. This is what I warned you about. This is the corruption that her mother brought to our world. But his supporters were no longer cheering. Many of them were stepping back, trying to distance themselves from a sinking ship. The purple crystals were being quietly removed and hidden in pockets. Daniel felt a moment of hope. Maybe this would end peacefully. Maybe Marvith would accept defeat and go into exile. Maybe there would be no more violence. Then he saw Marvith's hand move toward his belt. Gun! Daniel shouted. The word meant nothing to the Volanti, but the warning was clear. Marvith pulled a weapon from beneath his uniform, a sleek crystal device that glowed with deadly energy. He aimed it at Celira. If I cannot have the throne through law, Marvith snarled, I will take it through blood. Daniel moved without thinking. He threw himself between Marvith and Celira, spreading his arms wide. It was a stupid thing to do. He was unarmed. He was human. He was nothing against a weapon that could vaporize him in an instant, but he did it anyway. Get out of my way, human, Marvith said. This does not concern you. You will have to kill me first, Daniel replied. His voice was shaking, but he did not move. And if you kill an unarmed diplomat, You will start a war with Earth. Is that what you want? A war on two fronts? Against the humans and against everyone in this room who now sees you for what you really are. Marvith hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, everything changed. Celera raised her hands, and the crystals in the walls began to sing. It was a high, pure note that filled the chamber and vibrated in Daniel's chest. The light in the room shifted, focusing on Marvith, trapping him in a spotlight he could not escape. You have broken the sacred law of the speaking, Celera announced. Her voice was amplified by the crystals, echoing from every surface. You have drawn a weapon in the throne room. You have threatened the life of your queen. By our oldest laws, your life is forfeit. Guards appeared from hidden doors, surrounding Marvith with weapons raised. The old commander looked around wildly, searching for his supporters, but they had all melted back into the crowd. He was alone. This is not over, Marvith hissed. Yes, Celera said quietly. It is. The throne room was quiet now. The guards had taken Marvith away, and the crowd stood in stunned silence. Daniel realized that his legs were shaking, and he had to lock his knees to keep from falling down. Katie pushed through the crowd and grabbed his arm. Her face was pale, but her eyes were bright with something that looked like pride mixed with fury. You absolute fool, she whispered. You magnificent, stupid fool. I know, Daniel said. I know. Celera turned to face them. Up close, she was even more striking than Daniel had realized. Her eyes seemed to hold depths that went on forever, and when she looked at him, he felt like she was seeing everything he had ever been or done. You saved my life, she said. You risked everything for a stranger. Why? Daniel thought about the question. He thought about Clara, about the guilt he had carried for years, about the promise he had made at her grave. But those were his reasons, not the ones that mattered right now. Because it was the right thing to do, he said simply. Because someone was being hurt by lies, and I could not stand by and watch. Celera studied him for a long moment. Then she did something that made the entire crowd gasp. She bowed. The Princess Queen of the Volanthi Empire lowered her head to a human diplomat. Among my people, she said, such a bow is reserved for those we consider true equals. You have earned that honor today, Daniel Carter. Daniel did not know what to say. He bowed back, trying to match her grace, and probably failing badly. Katie made a small sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. The high priest stepped forward. His ancient voice rang through the chamber. The speaking is concluded. High Lord Marvith has been found guilty of false testimony and attempted violence against the crown. His fate will be decided according to our laws. Princess Queen Celera remains the rightful ruler of the Volanthi Empire. A cheer rose from the crowd. It started small, but it grew until it filled the entire chamber. The crystals in the walls picked up the sound and amplified it, turning it into a wave of noise that Daniel could feel in his bones. Celera raised her hand, and the cheering faded. She walked back to her throne and turned to face her people. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear. Today, we have seen something remarkable. A stranger came into our sacred hall and defended our honor when our own blood had forgotten it. A human stood between me and death when my own uncle tried to murder me. This is not weakness. This is not corruption. This is what true alliance looks like. She gestured for Daniel to come forward. He walked up to stand beside the throne, feeling the eyes of thousands on him. I have decided to create a new position in my government, Celera announced. From this day forward, there will be a human advisor to the Volanthi throne. Someone who can offer us the perspective of a species that has survived its own darkest impulses and learned to build rather than destroy. Daniel Carter, I offer this position to you. Will you accept? Daniel looked at Katie. She shrugged and shook her head, but she was smiling. I will have to clear it with Earth, she said. But I think they will say yes. Daniel turned back to Celira. I accept, he said. I will do my best to serve your people and mine. Then it is done. Celira took his hand in hers. Her skin was cool and smooth like polished stone, but he could feel a pulse beneath the surface, a living warmth that was not so different from his own. Let this be the beginning of a new era, not just for our two peoples, but for all who choose peace over war, understanding over hatred, courage over fear. The crowd cheered again. Daniel stood beside the throne and let the sound wash over him. He thought about Clara, and for the first time in years, the memory did not hurt. He had done something good today. He had stood up when it mattered. He had not stayed silent. Later that night, Daniel stood on a balcony overlooking the Volanti capital. The city spread out below him like a garden of glowing crystals, beautiful and strange and full of life. Katie stood beside him, holding a glass of something that the Volanti considered a celebratory drink. You know, this is going to change everything, she said. Earth is going to have a real voice in the most powerful empire in this sector. Other species will want the same. The whole balance of power is going to shift. Is that a bad thing? Daniel asked. Katie considered the question. No, she said finally. I do not think it is. I think it is exactly what we need. A reminder that sometimes one person standing up can change the universe. They stood in silence for a while, watching the lights of the alien city. Somewhere below, Celira was dealing with the aftermath of the speaking, the political work of rebuilding trust and punishing traitors. It would not be easy. There would be challenges ahead, enemies who remained hidden, problems that could not be solved with a single speech. But for tonight, there was peace. For tonight, the right side had won. Daniel raised his glass to the sky, to the stars that humans and Volanti both called home. To Clara, he said quietly, I hope you can see this. I hope you know I finally did what I should have done. The stars did not answer. They never did. But Daniel felt something lift from his shoulders, a weight he had carried for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to stand straight. He smiled and turned back toward the light.